What fact became terrifying to you as an adult, which you didn't notice, didn't bother you as a child? Write what fact became terrifying for you as an adult, or what you did not notice and did not worry about as a child. Enjoy watching. Story 1. Becoming a wage salary slave for the rest of my life and finding out I didn't have to do it because it was only for me to have a lot of very nice things. The truth was that I didn't need to have all of the very nice things, and if I lived as a non-compulsive consumer, I could afford to live on the limited income I earned. It sounds nice, but only those who are forced by circumstance to live on a government payment can have this kind of life. How much money could we have if we didn't use petrol, gas, electricity, or pay rent? Sounds like a situation predating the Industrial Revolution, doesn't it? Do this and save the planet. But the majority are addicted to very nice things and will never do this. This is something I didn't know as a kid. Story 2. How many times we have come within the skinniest whisker of nuclear war. For me, the 1983 Soviet false alarm is the scariest as it was only because the guy looking at the false radar data showing the 5 incoming nukes kept a cool head and refused to alert his seniors because he figured that if the US was really launching an attack, they'd launch more than 5 missiles. Followed closely by the instance in the Cold War where a bear tripped an alarm at a US airbase which sounded the "we are under nuclear attack" klaxon, and everyone at the base hopped into their nuclear-armed planes to retaliate and were only stopped by someone running onto the runway and waving at them to stop. Other contenders: Nixon issuing the command to nuke a North Korean airbase, he was drunk at the time apparently, and Henry Kissinger having to issue a stand-down order, and the time in the Cuban Missile Crisis when a Russian nuclear sub dived to avoid detection from nearby American ships during a period of very high tension, and then lost radio contact with the USSR Naval Command and assumed nuclear war had begun because the Americans dropped practice depth charges near the sub and the sub thought they were real. Captain gave the order to launch nukes and the second officer refused. Story 3. Social media and sites such as Reddit becoming these big social echo chambers for the most part, and everyone's values being diminished because of it. Our politics is crazy to me. Don't ever hint at Trump becoming president again, or you'll be chain banned from multiple subs via a bot. Story 4. Watching the decline of my own health and that of my loved ones. My parents are getting on in years, and it scares me to think I may only have another 10 years with them, realizing how dangerous the world can be now that I have a kid. As a child, you don't consider all the things that can happen. When I was about 5 years old, I remember an older lady approaching me in a shopping center while my mum was momentarily distracted and trying to lure me with a knockoff Barbie doll to come to her house and play. I was so annoyed that my mother would not let me go. "Not a bloody chance," were her exact words. It was only a few years ago that I remembered this interaction and realized that the lady seemed very creepy, and that's why my mom's reaction was so abrupt. Now I watch my son like a hawk. Story 5. How much I don't really talk to my parents and how lonely they must be feeling in their empty nest, and how I'm scared that I would be equally lonely too when my kids are all adults and have their own life and family. That's why, even though I feel my parents are a lot annoying at times, I want and I try my best to talk to them often. Story 6. Time matters and timing matters. I started off my early 20s by losing almost 60 kgs, going from about 130 kilograms to about 74 kilograms. It was surprisingly easy, and I lost most of it in the first 2 to 4 months, basically a couple of weeks. But yeah, with that, I kinda had a bittersweet moment with this success. It mattered less at that time than it would 3 or 5 years earlier. Time matters, and timing matters. It still had value at the time, but it could have had more value. Quality is much better since I can just jog to places now. When you're in your early 20s and teens, if you suddenly start eating healthy and work out every day, I'm sorry to say. But yeah, chances are, women treat you better. Also, you might treat yourself better. People in general treat you better, not just women. They can recognize your positive traits better. There wasn't really much interesting going on in my life in my teens besides rugby, which sort of was my main talent. That would have been vastly better if I figured out my fitness goals when I was in secondary school. And it didn't just apply to fitness at the time. I also realized I could handle higher level of study. It's just that it wasn't the culture I had access to until year 11. I imagine how much Moremi could achieve if the structure was there to aim higher at a slightly younger age. It's less of a regret of the past, but points taken about the future and how I handle things today and tomorrow. Time matters, timing matters, find good goals, figure out how to achieve, find a way to be more perceptive. People are overweight or obese for such a large percentage of their life without knowing just how quickly it could be solved by a couple weeks of effort. Story 7. That I don't look the same age on the outside as I feel on the inside. That adults weren't fussy. They have to make risk/benefit decisions even about trivial stuff. What time should I drink my last coffee? Do I mop now so my back will have recovered by bedtime, or do it just before bed? Is the aftermath worth the booze? Has the milk been open 3 days or 4? Mostly that getting older stops being fun. Story 8. Realizing that even though you're an adult, you're still stuck in an abusive situation, and you have no say over it, and your partner is being abused by his parents, and they'll never get better. So I guess realizing that adults can't be trusted, and that they will keep hurting you even though they're supposed to support you. Story 9. Not having money. As a kid, not having money kind of sucks, but you're not really using money for essential things. As an adult, you're practically screwed if you don't have money, and it can get terrifying, watching the amount in your bank account dwindle down. The pay at my old job wasn't the best, and basically half of it went to rent, with the rest for groceries, fuel, bills, and what have you. It was a massive panic for me, getting down to double digits and frantically refreshing my bank app on payday to see whether I'd been paid yet or not. Story 10. You know, it's funny how as kids we feel invincible, right? But as adults, that feeling kind of fades away when you realize how fragile life really is. I mean, one moment everything's normal, and the next everything can change. It's like a wake-up call that hits you out of the blue. Makes you appreciate the little things a bit more, doesn't it? Story 11. I am the middle child. Didn't actually cross my mind that they would rely on me, more cues my parents used to tell me and my younger brother, that their oldest will take care of our family in the future financially wise because she excels in school. Now I gotta get myself to school, provide for food, bills, and rent. My oldest sibling is still living with us with her 3 sons and always asking me if I have money. Story 12. All the grown men getting underage girls drunk and doing things to them if they passed out. Didn't happen to me, but my sisters and their friends. They just said it was your own fault if you passed out. Didn't think anything of it until when I was grown up and realized they were groomed and repeatedly raped while unconscious. Story 13. How easy it is to die. It's terrifying to see just how suddenly and unexpectedly things will just simply take you out. I can recall when I was in high school and junior high school, etc. I used to love movies like Transformers and war films and stuff like that. It didn't really impact me when I saw somebody ripped in half or shredded by a machine or cut down by bullets in the middle of a field. But now, as an adult with some legs under me, I can't even watch movies like that because all I can think about is the mass loss of human life that had no involvement in the original issues. Looking at you, Transformers and Marvel. Story 14. How expensive everything is. I know things weren't always this expensive, but I grew up very comfortably. Never saw my parents stress about money, and never even really heard them talk about it. So I never knew how expensive it was to maintain a household, provide for a family, and still be able to afford certain luxuries, like vacations, etc. When I started learning about the true cost of living, it was so overwhelming. I don't know how my parents did it, and I'm even more grateful to them knowing how hard they worked for the life we have. Certain milestone life events, that is, buying your first home, getting married, having kids, are not guaranteed. When I was younger, I thought everyone experienced those life events, and it would come easy. I'm 30. Nowhere near close to being able to buy a home. The dating pool sucks, and I have the worst luck. And my biological clock is ticking, unless I meet someone and move incredibly fast. The older I get, the more I realize I may not get the things I want most out of life. And I could very much end up old and alone with no family beside me once my parents are gone. Story 15. That most people don't obey the law while they drive. Even simple laws, like turning on your turn signal before you make your turn, or just using it at all. It's a speed limit. Someone can go a bit below the speed limit as long as they're obeying their laws, not going below state speed minimum, staying in the right-hand lane, pulling over in a turnout when on a 1-lane road. Stopping close behind me at a stoplight isn't going to speed anything up, but our cars will be sandwiched if you or someone behind you is rear-ended. I was oblivious as a child that people didn't understand the difference between stop and yield, or that no one understands how to use a stop sign. DMV handbooks are usually readily available on a state's DMV website. Story 16. I grew up in a relatively small town, Montana. My only real exposure to wealth growing up was knowing that the guy who owns the big construction company with his name on it was wealthy. It wasn't until I got out of Montana and traveled to bit cities that I realized I had no idea. The wealth gap is far greater than most people have any concept of. We assume that doctors, athletes, and movie stars are rich. However, these people are basically homeless when you compare them to the richest 0.1% or 0.01%. Story 17. Doctors not actually having time to run every test and exhaustively search until you have answers to what's wrong with you like they do on TV. Turns out you often have to fight and beg for decades going from doctor to doctor for someone to finally figure it out. And then even when they finally do figure it out, Kid me always thought there would be a medicine or surgery or something like stem cells to fix it. Turns out, most treatments give you only some improvement at best, and you have to decide if it's worth the side effects. And some conditions have no treatment beyond managed stress, because there's nothing else we can do. Story 18. Oddly enough, needles. As a child, I was totally cool with needles and shots. Watched the needling going in and everything. Nurse told me I was a brave boy all the time. I had zero problem with it. Now as an adult, I get dizzy even with a simple flu shot or something. When I got my COVID shot, I got all dizzy and whatnot. And the farm tech giving the shot got worried thinking they needed to call EMS. My wife had to explain I'm just a big baby when it comes to shots and needles, and this is in fact normal for me. Story 19. As a kid, I was scared of my own mortality. As an adult, I'm scared of other people's. My parents had me when they were in their late 30s/early 40s, and the thought of them dying scares the shit out of me. Same with friends dying or my other relatives. Death is all around us, and I don't know what I'm going to do when someone close to me dies, and I have to figure out how to cope with it because I'm now the adult and not the kid. Story 20. My guaranteed mortality. Growing up as a kid thinking you're invincible and myself thinking there's no way I'll get cancer, maybe at a way older age. Nope, bladder cancer at 20. Even though all is good now, it has left me with health anxiety 5 times worse than before, and most importantly, it has left me coping and trying to process my own mortality. Terrifying is an understatement. Story 21. How hard health insurance is, and how much of it is set up to screw you over. I've had 2 somewhat close friend colleagues had to deal with it all. It's crippling, and it ruined their life. Every other day, I'm thinking about emigrating to somewhere with better access to health care. I call up Kaiser to schedule a psychiatrist. They unapologetically tell me that it's almost impossible, and the next available one would be months from now. Cunts. Absolute fucking cunts. They took my money and they gave me nothing. Story 22. One house we lived in when I was a kid got struck by lightning and burned down. Another got flattened by a tornado. A third had a pipe burst and flooded to a comical level. I got hit by a car, spent time in a ditch in a rainstorm, and nearly died 4 or 5 different ways. What's terrifying to me as an adult is that that's not normal. Story 23. Came to the realization that adults don't know shit about shit. Everyone is just an adult-sized child trying to act like they know better than the next person, and most aren't very good or gracious about it. Also, there comes a time that you realize that you need to be self-reliant. There's no help coming, no use in crying about life and everything that comes along with it. You are the help. Story 24. The fact nobody knows what the hell is even going on around them and we are all just winging it. No adult has their life fully figured out, and as Joker says, we are all just on bad day away from going insane. The idea that the whole day-to-day could crumble in a moment and I would have no control over it is terrifying as an adult. But as a child, I never noticed it or paid any attention to it. Story 25. This one is pretty specific to my life, but when I was a preteen, there was an industrial accident, preventable many lawsuits, at my dad's work that resulted in the deaths of dozens of workers. My dad was on his way to work that morning when it happened and, due to the nature of his job, could have caused the accident himself. At the time, I knew it was really sad, but I was a kid, and I moved on with my life. My dad was safe. 30-plus years later, even the thought of what happened is enough to set me off. What if my dad had gotten to work a bit earlier? My life would have been completely different, not to mention the overwhelming sympathy I have for those who lost family members. It's so tragic. Story 26. Around age 20 when it hit me that the old men I encountered did not immediately question my virginity. The first questions out of their mouths were no longer, "How are you? And so have you had any boyfriends yet?" When that weight of being a walking target of pedophiles lifted, and I realized I had only aged out of their target range, the men hadn't changed. And it would take a further 19 years, until I was 39, for it to hit me that a grown man putting my hand on his penis when I was a child had been illegal. The Kevin Spacey trial made me flash back to that and realize it had been illegal. It is not a jealousy but past experience that makes many grown women hate pedophiles like we do. Story 27. Very few of us leave this world fully intact. I had a horrific wisdom tooth removal just as COVID hit. It was extremely deep-rooted, and the dentist was kind of a butcher. I did not have insurance, so the job went to the lowest bidder. Took about an hour for the extraction. He had to break it into several pieces and had to go back in after sewing me up, because he left some behind. I do not do well with change, particularly changes to my body. It took me a few years to psychologically recover from the experience. A global pandemic, and my overuse of cannabis at the time really didn't help any. I still have anxiety episodes every once in a while, thinking about what part of me will fail or have to be removed next. Also, American healthcare is a joke and a scam. That's pretty damn terrifying. Story 28. How much work it is to budget and not blow through your money so fast. I like to cook, and I'm decent at it, but it takes a lot of time. I usually cook from scratch for my family because it's cheaper, but I have to be very judicious as to how I use my time. We eat a lot of soups and stews because I can throw food in a pot, get it simmering, and walk away. I can make a huge pot of soup for $1.10 that will last us several days of suppers and lunches, but the prep and cooking time can be a lot. Also, cooking cheaply often involves a lot of starchy carbs. Meat is so expensive, and beans add more carbs to a meal. I do keep usually one pre-packaged frozen meal in the freezer for when I'm tired or the evening is too busy. But it can be $1.30 for a meal that we'll completely consume in one sitting. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it, be sure to write comments and share your stories.